The Greeley Creative District is a nonprofit board that's been around since 2012, and we formed to be able to amplify, cultivate, incubate the arts, and to be a supportive thread, if you will, between all the different forms of art that we have in Greeley. Greeley is known for being a very rich community in terms of the arts, and we think that's what we'd like to make sure that we can continue and promote and make sure that we are staying connected as creatives, because it's a lot of work, and we know that there's some challenges, particularly with some of the funding shifts that have happened and some of the landscape that's around us. But we think that we're going to come out of this chaos stronger than ever, and this is why we put together these workshops, is because we think tying groups of creatives with some of the talents and the leadership that we have here is one way to do that. What we're going to do is, this is a discussion that we want to have be really fruitful for you all, and so I'm going to have our speakers introduce themselves, and then we're going to go through a series of questions, and there'll be time for Q&A afterwards. So if you have a burning question or something comes up that you think, that just stimulated a thought, make sure that we get a chance to answer those. So with that, we also thank our sponsors that are up on the screen. Those are the folks that help us make this possible, to underwrite this and make it free to you all. So if you run into any of the folks that are associated with these businesses, please holler and give them a thank you, and hey, we're glad you can help support this kind of a cause for us. With that, we've got three really tremendous speakers. I'm going to pass the microphone down, have each of them introduce themselves, and then we'll start with a couple questions to get going.
My name is Chalice Springfield. I own a coaching and training company called Unstoppable Curiosity. I actually hail really from the entrepreneurial space. I was in the real estate industry for about 33 years, but I've had a coaching and training company for about 15 years, and now do that full time, and I'm about to celebrate my 3-year anniversary of that.
Hello, my name is Dylan Fixmer. I am a composer. I'm currently the composer in residence with the Greeley Philharmonic Orchestra, and I also teach composition at the University of Northern Colorado.
And I am Colette Pitcher. I was born and raised in Greeley, and currently I have the Showcase Art Center just down 8th Avenue on 14th Street, and have been there for about 30 years.
Obviously, we have a nice cross-section of folks and lots of experience with working with different forms of art and creativity, and of course have experience with mental blocks or creative blocks as they may be. So to start out, would love each of you to talk a little bit about how you might define a mental block or creative block. What does it mean to you to have that happen? And how does it show up for you?
Colette, you want to start? I was like always.
Okay. Well, I know I've been a commercial artist and a graphic artist, and I am accessible, and people are always asking me for a service or something, and sometimes I get caught up, and I stand there thinking, I don't know what to do. No one's telling me what to do. So yeah, it's a mental block, a creative block is just that. It's kind of a blank out. What do I do next? And that can be a really scary thing sometimes, and it can be exciting to have an open space in your day. So those don't last long for me. I think of stuff real quick if I've got an open space.
Yeah, I think just kind of jumping off of that concept of blankness, not having a trajectory or a direction to be able to head, or feeling like there's lack of light in a particular direction. I also experience when I'm feeling that is a sense of drained or emptiness, like I don't have any, I'm not full enough to contribute anything. I'm just like empty of thing, and so it doesn't feel like, I don't know, instead of being a block, maybe it's an emptiness of creativity instead of a block in the way. There's a way, I just don't know where to go with it.
I think when we were talking about this before we all got together on the panel, I think a mental block can also just be a sense of feeling stuck or high-centered. Like, we know what that means in Colorado. I don't think people in Florida know what it means to be high-centered. You know, your wheels are spinning, and you don't, to Colette and Dylan's point, you're maybe not sure how to keep going or to stay in action. And so I think when I'm blocked, it may just feel that I'm spinning my wheels and not being very effective, and just literally stuck. And so that's how I would kind of describe a mental block for me.
I think we can relate. That's a really lovely combination, not lovely from the standpoint it's nice to experience, but it is a great breadth of experience that it shows up, either stuck, too much, not enough, but an emptiness, not really able to kind of figure out what that next step is. Talk to us a little bit about when that shows up for you. Do you notice a time in particular? Is it a cycle? Is it more than a bad day? How does it show up to you, and how do you recognize that I might be at that moment needing something to change?
Should I make you go first this time?
You can.
Okay,
yeah.
great. I think for me, I notice when my bucket is empty, you know, my self-care bucket, when I'm particularly tired, when I'm not putting my own oxygen mask on and, you know, taking care of myself. I think that is for sure when mental blocks and when I feel stuck. I think also, if I'm just totally being transparent, it's when I'm worried about what a lot of other people are thinking. And so those limiting beliefs, or that, I always call it the hamster in my head, when it's talking to me loud, I think that can also create a little bit of a mental block, because it's more about performing or pleasing other people and, you know, the outward appearance than it is about kind of what is calling my heart.
I'm going to piggyback off of that and just add another dimension to it, maybe, because not only is it the outward perspective of the pressures from other places that happens to me, but when I haven't filled myself with things that are inspiring. So kind of going along with that emptiness feeling is like, if I haven't gone out and done human things, how can I respond in a human way? Like, my art, personally, my art is very humanity driven and humanist in its center. And so if I am feeling like, well, where do I go? Or I'm just kind of drained of this thing, then I'm thinking, okay, well, it's because I haven't invested in these human things. I haven't gone out and become more human. I've just hid myself away, and now it's been too long since I've been out, so I need to go out and fill up.
That's a good one. Yeah, it can be a lot of things, and I took notes for you today. I put out a sheet of some of my ideas on why it happens and what we can do about it. And it might be, I think blocks come from fear of somewhat. Some fear of being, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I'm going to be compared with others, all those fears that we have all the time, and maybe my skills aren't good enough. Oh, I want to enter this show. Oh, I'm not good enough. You know, all that kind of thing. Or for me, I remember talking about art, and it has to be deep. And right now, art has to have some social justice or cause or be something really strong. And I've always said, you know, I'm just not that deep. I like the beauty of that scene. That's what I'm doing. So whatever it is, there are ways to get around all these problems. If it's a fear of skill building, then build those skills. Get out there, take classes, get that pencil out, keep tooting that horn. Whatever it is, keep doing it. And eventually you come to a point where you don't really care what others think. And of course, comparison is the thief of joy, as is perfection. Just get rid of those, but it's hard. Realistically, it is hard.
So each of you have talked a little bit about kind of how you recognize it in yourself, and that there's sort of this point that you get to where you're not feeling quite human. I'm not sure what the opposite of human feels like, but that apparently you're feeling it. And also the kind of grind it out, kind of get through it somehow. What kind of obstacles get in your way of making that shift? So you know you're stuck, you know you're in that place where there's a block. What kind of obstacles kind of pop up for you or get in your way and keep you from maybe taking that next step?
Okay. I think the thing for me that is the biggest step is kind of going back to what you said about fear. It's that fear of failing others, fear of failing myself, or fear of feeling those things, or just the fears in general, because they start becoming additive. I have this fear, and then this fear stacks on top of that one, and it just becomes walls. And it's just a compounding nature of fear that if you don't have the bandwidth or the mental capacity to recognize those fears in yourself, they just build up and build up and build up unless you're addressing them. You know, if I'm just kind of singularly focused on a creative project to the point where I'm not recognizing the things that are building up around it, then I can tie myself in a knot really quickly without even knowing that it's there, because I haven't said, oh yeah, I'm afraid of doing this. So I think that's that part for me, for sure.
Oh, yeah, I listen and then I forget who I am. Okay. Really good points. As a visual artist, all the time we get put into art shows and we say, oh, you're first and you're second, and oh, you're rejected. That's horrible. And all your career you've gone through that. And now I have classes with people who are retired, have all the time in the world, really have no competitive spirit. They just want to have fun and be entertained. It's delightful. And I wish I could have told my younger self to be more of that. It just doesn't matter. Do it for yourself, your heart and your soul. You'll be so much happier. But if you got to pay the bills, you got to get out there and do something else. So there's the sides.
I mean, I think I was alluding to it earlier, that the hamster in my head is what usually is, it's usually me that's the obstacle, right? The stories that I'm telling myself, the limiting beliefs that I have, those are usually the biggest obstacles. Certainly there are obstacles about technical skills or learning or those things, but those are not usually what's keeping me from having a mental block. It's usually my own thinking and the own stories that I tell myself in my head. I think we all have that. I always talk about the lizard brain, and that's our amygdalas that are the oldest part of our brain that is, running the show, fight, flight, freeze. And so it's not unusual, I think, for all of the things that we're saying that we would have a mental block because of ourselves. It's because our lizard brain is trained to do that, right? To keep us in our comfort zones. And when you're trying to do creative things and you're trying to get out there, I think that's where the difficulty comes in, is to tell the lizard brain, you can sit in the back seat for a little bit, right? and not have a conversation today with me. Oh, yeah.
This just occurred to me because you were talking about competitions and things, and so I actually think there's a bigger mental block to me now than I've ever experienced, which is I have an addiction for looking for the next competition that I can submit something to. And it is this, and it's a weird process, but it's like, I have some time to write today, so I'm going to write. But first I'm going to check and see if there is any competition listed on this site. And 3 hours later, I'm still looking for the next thing that I can do, and I have no writing done. And I think that there's like an avoidance there too. Like, if I'm looking for the next thing and I can try and find it, then maybe it'll be there, and then I'll be able to submit for it, and then I'll have time to write. But it's just like, why didn't you just spend that time writing? So I think there's just like we can get addicted to social media and like that instant gratification cycle of social media and stuff. I find for myself that I'm also addicted to looking for those opportunities that are really not actually, if I look at my career and I go, what opportunities did I really have? Did I create opportunities for myself, or did I get all these opportunities from things that were out there? It's like, no, I actually created all those opportunities for myself. So I don't know why I'm spending so much time looking for these things that have not been fruitful in the past. Like, I should be doing those other things. So I don't know. That's another one of those weird fear things.
I think there must be a direct tie to dieting that goes along with that very same thing. So I'm going to finish the donuts and then I'm going to go on a diet. So that's a perfect segue into my next question for you, which is thinking of that blank canvas or that assignment that you have or that competition that you're looking for, it seems like we've really developed some fantastic avoidance behaviors. Thinking of your favorite or your more common or your trap door, your avoidance behavior, can you give us some examples of the avoidance behaviors that you have? Dylan's just offered one really good one, that keep you from taking that next step, that contributes to the block.
Oh, this is a bad day to ask me. I've spent all day typing forms for the Stampede for volunteerism. I have a real bad volunteer problem. But you know what? And donations. If you're an artist, you get asked for a donation about 14 times a day. But if you look back over your life, it's the volunteer activities that I know everybody from. And I hope the donations are appreciated, because sometimes they get them for a real good deal. But yeah. So do volunteer, and do go out there and put your time out there, because it'll show up in lots of good ways. I was thinking the show thing is a real roller coaster also. Artists are on a roller coaster all the time. You win the show, oh my gosh, you're gonna do something else and you get really excited, then you have something bad happen, you're rejected from the show, I'm gonna give up. And you're always doing that. So don't give up on scrolling for the shows. Pick out 3 to 5, set your limit, throw it out there, and one of them will come through. That's been my experience. And yeah, you don't scroll through it all the time, but you do need to do it every so often, maybe once a month. Maybe limit your time for scrolling, and then see what happens. If you get invited, and if you don't, then enter 3 more the next month.
Do you have a favorite avoidance
Avoidance, besides volunteerism. So running a business that has to keep open, and there's a lot of things pushing you, like all the expenses anymore, property taxes, the expenses. I do go into the office and say, okay, I'm not going to do something fun, I'm going to chase the money. I have to get the billing done, I have to get the things I can done to make this business operate. Then you can go paint a new painting. Yes, so yeah.
Besides what I listed before, I think another thing that feeds into that fear loop is going through your portfolio instead of like writing the next thing. It's like, well, what did I do here? And then you're just sitting there analyzing the whole thing the whole time, and you're like, okay, and I haven't done anything. So I think getting into that loop of, well, this was safe because I've already done it. And so I want to be back here in this space because it's safe, instead of putting yourself out there for the next thing to try and do. The feeling that safety net of yourself, like I was successful here, so I'm just going to stay here, instead of, I think that can be an avoidance behavior for me for sure, is feeling that safety net, because it's inherently unsafe creating new things. Yeah.
I have lots of avoidance techniques. I'm like, where do I start, right? But it makes me actually think of being focused on the right things, like the concept, the 80-20 concept you've probably heard of, the Pareto principle, where we have 20% of our activities that really produce 80% of our results, and that might be composing, it might be painting, it doesn't feel like billing, right, or invoicing, but the challenge is that we have to do the 80. We want, whenever I teach that class, people are like, can we just get rid of the 80? It's like, you still have to do your 80% activities. But I think, to Becky's point, that can sometimes feel like you're avoiding your art. If we knew what our 20% activities were and actually spent time doing it on a regular basis, how much more fruitful we would be. If you actually take a 40-hour work week, which probably no creatives actually work 40 hours, right? This is like working more hours than that. But if you took a 40-hour work week and just took 20% of that time, it's about 96 minutes a day, right? And so if you actually thought about spending 96 minutes on your 20% time, if you did that just 3 days a week, where you spent 96 minutes on composing, or I mean, probably have to do it more often, but what's your 20% time or on painting? But really focused on your high payoff activities. You would actually, if you did that 3 days a week, it would be equivalent to 1 whole month of work, 31 days. If you did it 5 days a week, it's 52 days. And so sometimes when I'm getting, I know this is a long-winded answer, but when I feel like I'm avoiding things or spending too much time on my 80%, I just tell myself, invest 96 minutes today, right? And try to just have the consistency over the intensity, because it's gonna pay off. Even if I'm having a mental block and it's not my best work, your consistency is important. So I know that didn't specifically answer avoidance, but I sometimes think we think we're avoiding when we're doing our 80, when really that's still important stuff in the world of being a creative.
Those are great observations, and it made me think a little bit as you were talking about that, how much risk enters into this equation of, do I go forward, do I not, do I take that next step, don't I? One of the concepts that I heard you talking about earlier too was muscle memory, that sometimes the getting good at what you do allows you then to take risks, be doing something else. Can you talk a little bit about where risk and muscle memory maybe fit into getting past these mental blocks or creative blocks?
Yeah. I mean, that for me is craft, like practicing the art form and not expecting the practice of that art form to be fruitful beyond the concept of practice. So it's like, instead of having a final product that I'm expecting out of this practice, I'm just messing with stuff, or I'm playing with stuff. So this for me is something that I tell my students is like, I want you to treat music like Play-Doh, and I want you to play with it, and then I want you to mush it back and put it back in the bin, because at the end of the day, it's just meant to mess with shapes and create those different concepts. So if I'm trying to treat my own craft that way and build craft in that way, then I'm building tools towards when I have that moment where I've got a larger commission that is requiring me to do those types of things. So also thinking about that in terms of scale, like I'm building craft at a very small scale on a daily basis, and I'm building that craft so that I can do a chamber piece of music that's 3 minutes long, and I'm building that craft so I can do an educational piece of music that's 5 minutes long, and I'm building all of that craft surrounding it so that I can do an electric cello concerto that's 30 minutes long, and those things are all interconnected, but that safety net of building that craft, that solidness that says, yeah, I have the tools and I've built these tools for myself to think about the parameters of what I'm doing, in the sense of, like, for music, it's form and melody and harmony and just the basic building blocks, but I have a command of those that I feel comfortable with so that I can move them out. But I feel like people, especially, if you've not practiced that craft thing, you think that every product that comes out of you needs to be at the highest quality, rather than saying, well, this is not even a product, it's just me playing around. But that play is really important in building that foundation for yourself. That's for me, that's really strong.
I'm going to regress. You have a tough job herding cats, creative people. I'm back to the last question. Because a lot of these things I've solved because I've been around a while. But avoiding things. If I'm working at home, easy to avoid getting your creative work done, right? The laundry needs done, I'll just set the dishes up. If you've got kids, forget it. All kinds of stuff gets your attention, and the creativity, often by the time you're done with all the things you need to do, that's the exhaustion part. That's back to the first question. So I've watched successful artists treat it like a job. They have a studio, they go to work, they have regular hours, they set a schedule. And that might not be as fun and free as some of the creative peoples want to be, but that is part of building a successful practice that might be helpful.
I think the other thing in terms of muscle memory and practice is just being in action, and we think it has to be big action, sort of like what Dylan's talking about. And really, it's just, what if you just gave yourself permission to do tiny experiments or smaller actions and baby steps? Because if you make it almost ridiculously small that you couldn't not do it, right, you would probably engage with it. I was coaching somebody recently, and she was just stuck in her creative practice, and she said, I don't feel like it, I'm not motivated, all those things, right? And I said, well, what if the game you played every single day was to touch your art materials? Literally just touch them. And so, because here's what happens. She goes in her studio, and then she touches the materials, and she's like, well, this is kind of fun, right? It's not, and the experiment wasn't go create a little piece every day. It was just touch the materials. And she came back recently, like a month later, and she said, it's working. I'm touching the materials, and I'm creating more things that maybe aren't my best work, but they're practice, and I've actually sold some at a show, and it was really helpful. And she said, so I appreciated the tiny, smaller steps, in terms of, I don't know if this answers your question, Becky, about muscle memory, but I think if when you're feeling stuck and having a mental block, if you can just think of the smallest action you can do, that then it would be ridiculous if you didn't do it, that's the key. Oh yeah, don't.
I'm going to combine all of these things. So I think, well, just in that sense of having a studio space, a dedicated space for your own work, and having access to that space in a free way. Like something that I learned in undergrad was my trumpet professor told me, just don't put away your trumpet. Don't put it in a case unless you're traveling. Just have it out. And it's like, it's not going to get hurt. Even if it gets rained on, it's not going to get hurt. So just have it out and then like pick it up when you're ready to play. And that was such a game changer for me in terms of becoming a composer, because now I have my studio space, and my studio space is sacred. Like the things that go into that space are for creating music, and that's what goes in that space. And then my instruments are on hangers on the walls, and like the piano is ready there, and my desk is ready for writing. And so, yeah, it's just that idea that I can go in there at any point and be in a safe space for myself, that nothing's going to bother me. And I realize I'm very privileged with this, but those spaces can be rather small spaces, as long as that's what they're dedicated to. They don't need to be these glamorously grand spaces. If you've got the space for it, that's great, but it can simply be a small space that says, this is the only space that is for this. And then having everything out and ready to go in that space for you is also, instead of having, it feels like a chore to like take out the thing and move it around or whatever. It's just, nope, it's there for me, and here I go. So I think that's one of those small step things, like alleviating the obstacles as much as possible. What's an obstacle to me practicing? Well, that case is an obstacle to me practicing. It takes work to do that. And I know that sounds dumb, but it really is. It's like taking the thing out is half of the battle in some cases.
I think, Dylan, you've just described another one of those great avoidance techniques. If it takes so much effort to get everything set up, I don't have enough time to get my easel out and that blank piece of paper. Oh, what if I waste the resources? I don't have a lot of money. I don't want to spend all my money on paint that I'm going to waste. So we tell ourselves these stories to keep us from having to take that next step, and that creates that block. Something that all three of you, I think, have also shared, and maybe another way to think about this is that you want to fall in love with what you do. And when you're in love with what you do, there really is no limit to how much time you're willing to spend doing that. Have you ever had that moment where you just lose all concept of time, and what you're doing is so absorbing? That's the kind of place you want to be when you're with your craft. So when you're not there, what are the things that you help yourself out of that space? In other words, when I'm not feeling in love with my work, I have to pay the bill, so I've got a deadline. What are the things that help you corral that kind of void that's out there and get you back into falling in love with what you do and excited about that next thing?
Well, one thing I think that is a bit of a misnomer about all work in the world is that we have to love it all the time. And so not to put the question down, but I think sometimes what I have to tell myself is, you can do hard things. Like you may not love it today. And so that kind of mantra in my head is like, okay, I just finished this long series of workshops that I did, and they were fine, but I didn't really love the content, and I'd gotten hired to do it, and there were 9 of them, and they were 6-hour workshops, and I finally finished the last one, and I felt so elated. It wasn't that I didn't love it, but it just was a grind. And what I just told myself is, you signed up for this, it's gonna pay the bills, and get over it, right? I mean, like, so that mantra in my head, and and then I've done some workshops that I really did love recently. And so I think part of it too is not expecting that euphoria that Becky may I don't think she's meaning to describe it like that, but like that you're always gonna love your work, because there's just days that you don't, and there's things that you do to make money or to pay the bills that just require that maybe it's not your cup of tea.
I think to play the opposite side of that, and to be in that space where it's like, I really just don't love my art right now. Like, because I totally agree with you, Chalice, that it's like, there are some times when it's like, well, this is the grind and this is just the way that it is. But then to like go back to another aspect of that question might be like, well, what happens when I really do hate my craft? And it's not the 80%, it is like the 20%, and I'm sitting there going, I really hate this. Like, I don't like my own voice. I don't like what I did with this. And so I did something like a few months ago with a student who was dealing with something like this, and she visibly gaped at me, which is how I know that it worked. But I went to the piano and I said, okay, let me try this. And I sat down and I wrote a whole bunch of stuff. I wrote quite a bit of material, probably like 3 minutes of music material. And I looked at it and I grabbed it in the middle and I scrunched it up and I threw it in the trash, and I came back to my desk and she was like, and I was like, I didn't like it. And that's where it goes. That's where it belongs. It has no business staying in this world. It's just garbage, and that's totally fine. But what I learned is what I didn't want. So if I want to go and fish it out of the garbage now, I can go, well, that didn't work, and that didn't work, and that didn't work, and that didn't work. I can analyze it, or I can just think about it, and I can be like, well, that really didn't work. I need to go in a different direction. And so like being willing to, like, for lack of a better term, like burn your art is also kind of an interesting thing. And I know that my wife is oversitting, who is like going, no, don't do any of that. And so, sometimes it's not so drastic as to do that, but it's okay to recognize sometimes that I've gone down the wrong path with this. And I feel like one of those things for me that really helps recognizing that is when I look at a piece of music and I look at why it's gone wrong or why it's gone awry, it usually goes back to me being self-reflective and going, that really isn't a representation of me. That's a representation of something else, maybe something that I wanted. Ooh, it's really esoteric music that it's like, I could get some really good academic credit for this kind of piece of music or something, but it isn't me at the end of the day. It doesn't feel like me, and that's why I don't like it. And so being honest with myself about, is it good craft? Does it represent myself? And if those two things are not true, being like, well, then it's not me and it's fine. I'm going to leave it and I'm going to go in a different direction. And even if that is a commission, where the commission is saying, this is what I want out of this piece of music, but arriving at that point where I'm saying to myself, no, this isn't me. I can get at this answer in a different way that does two things at the same time. Answers the commissioner's question of this is what I want, but also is true to me at the same time. And I think that's been one of those aspects of not wanting to feel, or feeling stuck around that, well, this doesn't feel like my art anymore. It feels like something else that I'm doing. And so that willingness to say, is it true to me? And if it's not, saying, okay, well then in the garbage it goes and I'm gonna start in a different direction. And fortunately you don't need to like waste materials or something. You can scrape a canvas clean or something, you don't need to literally burn it. But that honesty with yourself can sometimes be a very relieving concept as well. Like if you're willing to have that conversation with yourself and just be like, well, it's not true to me, so I'm gonna let it go. That can also be a release in the sense that it's like, oh, okay, well, now I get to be me. Okay, what do I do when I'm me? You know.
Really true. No, I've heard stories about professors that do that, grab the person's art and scrump it and throw it, and well, that's shocking and kind of horrible. The point is, it's just paper. It doesn't matter. It's not that precious. I treat it kind of differently. When we paint, I give them permission. You're not going to make the perfect painting. The old masters couldn't do it. Why are you thinking you can do it? You make a painting and see if you learn something from it. Did you learn something from that? Great. Let's take that and we'll do the next painting. One painting begets the next painting. That's all you need. And you just keep going forward, and you'll change a million times through your life as well. So it's always evolving and changing. But forget doing the perfect thing. You're lucky you might fall in love with it. When I first start a project, I'm in love with it. This is the best thing I've ever done. Oh my gosh, this is fabulous. I'm thrilled with it. And by the time I'm done, I'm usually sick of it and I want to throw it out. Yeah. I don't suppose anybody's had that experience.
Just for clarification, it wasn't the students' thing that I was throwing out.
It was yours.
Yeah, it was my thing that I wrote.
I've had good to students.
Oh dear. Okay. Yeah. Don't do that. don't throw out other people's work.
Visual artists are meaner.
I was just going to add something. I think sometimes we're so serious about it, right? Like, I think what Dylan's talking about in Colette, it's like, be more playful, right? Just in life in general. If we came at it without this seriousness and got to get it perfect and, you know, furrowed brow, it's like, if we played a little bit more, how much more beneficial it could be just in general.
That's a great opportunity to, yeah, I think, and when we're talking about falling in love with it, it's that you're doing what you're doing because something draws you to it. There's something that addresses something that's inside of you or that is important for you to express in the way that you're doing it. So that's I guess the core that I hear Dylan talking about too, is that finding that genuine part of yourself. So we've talked about all the blocks. We've talked about some of the symptoms that those have. Let's talk about how you get past those. What are your personal kind of recipes for working yourself out of a block or realizing that you need to change channels? How do you do that?
Yep, somebody mentioned the bucket earlier, and you got to refill your bucket. If your bucket is empty, you got to go fill it. Go sit on top of a mountain. Go take a walk. Go. I made a whole list of them because I knew I'd forget them. But there's so many things you can do or step away from it. And nature is a big one. So we go travel around and go look for birds or. I'm ready for that last question now. See, I'm kind of slow. The muscle memory one, I'm going to tell you guys a secret I haven't told too many people. I went and bought a purple electric guitar. I don't play guitar, but I'm learning. But that muscle memory, that's what, I still don't understand music, and I approach the piano the same way. Until you get it. And I can play it. The music has to be there. I don't read music. I don't understand what is in here, but it's the muscle memory. It might be that way with painting, but I think it's a lot with the instrument thing. But yeah, keep doing it. Everything you do, even if it hurts to do it. You ever have your brain hurt? You're trying to learn something so bad? Statistics, you remember those classes? That's building synapses between your left and your right brain. And I don't care what they say, drawing on the right side of the brain. Nobody's half-brained. Well, okay, anyway. But we've got to build both sides of our brain, and finding projects that are new to you, that will help do it.
I agree. The bucket thing is huge. The filling yourself up with things that are recharging, if that's just personal or if that's artistic or whatever that is, that's huge. I also find that getting through a mental block requires this kind of Play-Doh kind of idea. Like if I look at, it's the Lao Tzu quote, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, or how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Why would you eat an elephant? But that concept that if I don't have parameters on a large project, if I don't give myself those little pieces to put together, that sometimes parameters can just be such a guiding force, that, you know, I don't need to conceptualize the whole thing right now. I can just conceptualize this bit. And if I get that bit, then I can add this to it, and it can be more of that puzzle piece concept, like I'm building a puzzle. So bucket filling, puzzle pieces, and then just the concept of play, again, going back to play and the Play-Doh concept. Well, I don't need it to be perfect right now, but what if I just, what happens, I think this is a great question for myself. Like when I sit down at the piano and I'm just like, well, I'm going to improvise something today. I'm not even going to write it down. I'm just going to improvise something. The question, what happens when I do this? And then do it. What happens when I do this? Some of the really cool concepts that I've discovered that are personally added to my voice as a composer have simply been things where I've just been like, well, what happens when I do this? Oh, that happens. Oh, that's an interesting experiment. And then I do more research into that concept. I go and I fill my bucket surrounding that, whatever that is, and suddenly I've arrived at something that can be very definitive to my own voice.
I think to answer Becky's question about what are some of the things that I like to use in the toolkit, I think it really depends. I think you have to ask yourself, you know, what do I need today? And so I have hamster brain, and so I made a little handout because sometimes I think we need to change our routine, right? And sometimes I think it's a mindset shift. And sometimes it's I need to spend time with friends. You know, I might call my friend Lori and like, let's go to lunch, or let's go for a walk around the park. And so I think part of it is all of this, right? It's a big toolbox, and that's why we could spend 20 minutes talking about all the tools in the toolkit. But sometimes I think asking yourself and checking in with, what do I feel like I need? Is it filling my bucket? Am I feeling tired? Maybe I need a nap, literally. I need to sleep, right? Or I need to eat. Like I'm hangry and it's not helping my flow and what I'm doing effectively. I didn't put if you're hangry, eat, but you might add that under the mindset shift, right? So I think some of those, and then on the back, I just thought, I like to gamify things, and so sometimes that's helpful for me as to get out of my mental block. Like I was talking about the person I was coaching, touch your art supplies. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna play bingo. And so, you know, you could just look on this list and say, gosh, I'm feeling stuck. Some of these, you might not like them, right? You might not like 10 out of the however many there are, but you might like 1 or 2, and that might help you. Just our point up here is to get the needle moving. You don't have to move it from 1 to 10, just 1 to 2, and then 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. So here's a bunch of ideas you can take with you.
Those are precious. One of the things that I think, and this will be our last question before we invite questions from you all too, is the difference between burnout and being stuck. There's a fine line there, and I think sometimes you have to be able to analyze that a little bit. It's not maybe just a little thing that you need to do, but maybe the reflection that you're talking about is, how do I know when I really need to step back and think a little bit more about what's going on with me? What kind of tips do you have for that, or what's your own self-reflection about that?
I feel like I just talked.
Okay. I have burned out hard in one thing in my life, and I knew I was there because I walked in after a month of doing it, and I said, you have said the same thing to yourself every day walking into this building for the last month, which is, I hate being here, and I don't want to do what I'm doing anymore. And what was interesting to me was, I used to be a public school teacher, and I taught kindergarten through 5th grade music, and I loved it for a long time. It was really a good thing for me. I was there for my students. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be doing the thing. And when I walked in there after that month, I thought, well, is it because you don't want to be a teacher? And the answer to that was no. No, I want to be teaching music. I want to be doing these things, but what is it really that I want to be doing with my life? And as soon as I figured out that it was like, oh, composing is what I really value in music for myself. That is really like composing in every kind of way, and teaching children to compose, or teaching anybody to compose, was really my heart spark. And so it was like, well, that's what I need to do with myself. I need to redefine what it was. So that burnout versus stuck, to me, is that's where that difference is am I just upset because I can't do the thing that I really want to be doing? Or am I literally doing something all the time that is just not me anymore? Or and I think that definition for me personally was the biggest switch in my life I've ever done. But I think that it goes back to that self-reflection bit. I needed to be aware of what were the things in my life that I wanted to do, and what were the things that I was actually doing with myself, and making, and even, I mean, it wasn't a huge jump, but it was enough to redefine. And because of that, because I was back on that track that was true to myself, I suddenly had this burst of like, yes, this is where I'm at. So I think you can recognize like burnout can be, because for me personally, burnout was because I wasn't being true to myself. I wasn't being honest with what I was able to do and what I was wanting to do. And when I switched that, it became this thing that was like, okay, no, this is where you're at. But versus like getting stuck in a project and going, well, this isn't working, and being willing to take it and throw it away and say, well, I'm starting in this direction. But at no point during that process of starting anew or starting fresh with something was I really like, I don't want to be doing this. I don't like being stuck, but I know that this is what I have to do, right? I know in my soul I'm a composer. I write music, and so this is the direction I need to go. Versus, this isn't actually what I don't like this. This isn't myself anymore. I think that was the big difference in my mind.
I get that. I remember going to a 9-to-5 job with a 2-hour one-way commute in New York City. And there wasn't a whole lot of creative time left at the end of the day. I was pretty close to burned out, but you didn't even know it because that's what you did. So creative people, that's the good news. You are all creative. You can come up with something new. And maybe that's what we like at certain points in our life. We have to come up with that something new. Don't be afraid to do it, especially if you find that you hate going into that building every day. Your life is short. I'm here to tell you. It's getting shorter all the time. You know, the older you get, it's like toilet paper. The roll goes faster toward the end. I'm starting to get worried because I see that. And don't waste your time. It's precious. And I look out at this sea of faces. You are my people. We have created our lives together. Isn't that amazing? So bless you for being here, and I appreciate you all.
I think to Dylan's point and Becky's point, burnout and feeling stuck can feel very similar. But I think like if you think about driving down I-25 and you're in a like major traffic not pile up, but just like it's stuck, right? You're like, okay, I want to continue on the highway. I feel like that's stuck. You just have some things that have to shake loose, but you're committed, right? You're committed to staying on the highway. Where burnout is, I need the nearest exit ramp immediately. And I think if we would tell ourselves the truth, and check in, sometimes it might feel like the same, right? It might feel like I'm on the same highway. I'm not sure if I really want the exit ramp. But if we allow ourselves the freedom to really do a deep dive or just do some self-reflection, I think typically we know when we want to get off the exit ramp. I also like what they say about people who are burned out. People who were burned out meant they were once on fire.
Oh, that's a great segue. Let's see if there's some other questions out there. Any of you have some questions for any of the panelists at this point that you'd like to ask them? All right. Yeah. You have one?
I think one thing you can do, Greg, is to make a list of all the things you do in a day and then try to sort the buckets. when you're new in the, maybe you're new to your creative practice, your creative craft, you may not know what's like, is this going to be results or is this just playing with Play-Doh? I actually think playing with Play-Doh is probably part of your 20. Like literally what Dylan's metaphorically talking about. But I think making a list and being present to what are all the things that you're doing in the day. And if you're like, this is all the 80%, now you have to ask yourself as a creative, what are the results what is the goal what are the results you're looking for? And then figure out, backing into that, okay, what would create those results? And then do that for 96 minutes a day.
And you can't always do it well. Sometimes you have to do it because it needs doing. You're not going to hit every day perfect, but you can have a goal and keep analyzing it and try for it. And, so cut yourself some slack. Some days you just type names into a computer all day.
I like to think of it as bumper bowling a little bit. If I throw it that way and it hits too much that way and that way and that way and that way, then I've thrown it a little bit too far in the wrong direction. So, there's a bit of that, like, well, I'm going to experiment with some things, but there's also the mindfulness to catch on to the things that are successful. So it's like, well, this was successful in the past, so I'm going to keep doing that. This was not successful in the past, so I'm going to prune that away. So maybe it's more like a tree. I'm going to prune it in the directions that I want it to be going because those are the fruitful directions, and I'm going to take off the parts that aren't fruitful or they're dead. Because and so to some extent that requires a little bit of patience and time away from projects to see. But if you're keeping tabs on it in some way, then I'm imagining that's going to be more helpful. Like I do keep tabs on the things like, well, this was successful. This was good for me to do. I'm going to continue to do those kinds of things. So, but yeah, finding that 80-20 concept, I don't know. It seems like it's an average, right? Yeah. It like the 80-20 is not necessarily it's an average, not a hard number. Yeah. Which, yeah.
I think the other thing, just one more thing, is that so many people spend time getting ready to get ready. And that's not 80 or 20. It's just getting ready to get ready. It's just wasting time, right? It's probably the avoidance technique.
We're pretty good at avoidance, I think. And we can recognize it sometimes. One of my favorite quotes is, begin anywhere. Begin anywhere. There's no wrong place to start to work on what it is that you love or what you're trying to do next. And we've heard from folks how not to be afraid to do that. It's okay to fail, but it's not failure. It's progressive learning. It's an evolution of what we're doing. So that seems to be a big part of it. But if you just give yourself permission to begin anywhere, that's not a bad place to start. So, any other questions for our panelists? If not, then yeah, Dana, yeah.
Yeah, so I've heard this thread of presence kind of woven through a lot of the responses, like I have to be present to what is it that I need, I have to be present as I'm pruning. What are some of your strategies for remaining present, like concrete things that you do on a daily or weekly basis?
Mindfulness, breathing, meditation, like acknowledging the present for what it is. I don't know, I've studied enough Eastern religion kind of stuff to know that, like, oh, okay, this is legitimately good practice to be aware of like the present and to be mindful and to take the time out of the day to breathe and be aware of your thoughts. I had a student tell me that that's not going to work. I don't have the time to take time to meditate every day. I said, 5 minutes. 5 minutes of meditation, try it. And he came back the next day, he was like, yeah, I do 20 minutes a day of meditation and it's working really well. And so I was like, okay, great. So, we tie ourselves in so many knots by trying to go to the next thing all the time with our creative endeavors and trying to be in the next, not in the present of that moment. And I think taking the time to actually, before you even begin a day of practice, begin a practice with meditation and clearing the mind, I have a very specific image in my head, and it's a old style blackboard with lots and lots of writing on it, and I don't really think about what's written on it, but I put all of my, like, this is all the things I'm thinking about right now, and I put it on that board, and then I erase it. And I erase it, and then I think about that blank slate, and I meditate on that, and then I'm ready for the day, because that mindfulness and that presence is really important to me. In order for things to come out, they need a clear pathway. They need a way to come out in a creative way. And if I've got all these roadblocks, all these things that are constantly in my way, then I know I'm not going to get there. And that kind of goes back to the same thing about space, like having a dedicated space or having all my tools ready to go, like that's creating less obstacles. And your brain can be such an obstacle to itself. So, yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't quite hearing you, Danielle, but I had another thought. For a long time, I've done something every year. How did Picasso know all the other Impressionists at the time? Who are they that are living in the world with us today? And I think of where would they meet? What kind of conferences would they be at? And so I'll look for those, and I'll go to one. I don't even know why I'm going. You just have to be in the right place for opportunities to happen to you. And they do, and they will. But if you stay at home and hide, they won't. So whether it's a workshop to go to or a conference to go to, find something that kind of interests you and go. And then go be present. Don't have any expectations. Maybe a few, and see what happens. That's always worked really well for something new and exciting.
I think in addition to what Dylan and Colette are saying, I think mindfulness and meditation are good. I also have a practice every Sunday night. My husband teases me because he's like, uh-oh, it's time for meeting with self. I literally have a meeting with myself every Sunday night. And it's not just for planning purposes, it actually gives me time to think and be present about what do I want to accomplish, what's going well, what's not going well. So I think we also have to set some time aside for thinking and literally being present in our creative craft and this is a business for us, right? I mean, creatives, it's not a hobby. You're here because you want to make money at this or create or produce something in the world. And so I take an hour every Sunday night and look at my week and think about, I have a little worksheet I fill out. And if I don't do that, I can tell that my whole being feels discombobulated. So I think having some practices like that, even if it's on a sticky note, what am I focused on this week? I think that could also be get our minds going in the right direction and present to what's happening.
What I love about what all you are saying, you're all saying, in terms of being present, it reminds me of a small story I read in a book about improv work, and it was all about the Japanese tea garden, where the rule is that while you're in this tea garden, and we are across the table from each other, and we're having tea, that is the only thing you are working on. You are being present in that moment because that's the only time that moment's going to be in your life. And so being able to focus completely on that person that you're having a conversation with or enjoying tea with, or what the lights are like. And the rule is that you're only focusing on what's in that room. You don't talk about what's outside that building, what's outside that time that you're spending, because of what you all three just said, which is being really focused on this moment, this time, this place is the most important thing you can be doing at that time. And that will feed you to the next thing that you need to do. So on your tables, there are a couple of colored sheets, and they just have questions for you. And what we'd invite you to do at this point is to go get another cookie, and of course we're going to feed the soul and the sugar and the salt. But there's some questions here for you. So the last half of what we want you to do today is just up to you, what you do with it or what you want to. But there's some questions here. So the ones that I had on the three that I had is, I worry I'll fall short of my expectations. When I'm on a roll with a new idea or a project, do I love or hate project boundaries? Am I afraid of failure or am I afraid of success? So If there's some things there that you want to just reflect on with the person that's next to you, you want to play around with some of these questions, this is your time to do that. But please enjoy the next half hour with each other and with refreshments. And let's give our panelists a hand.